It really feels like the United States is always involved in some kind of military action. A drone strike over here, a naval patrol over there, troops getting sent to some new hotspot. It's just this constant hum of activity. But is this just a string of bad luck and random crises? Or is it the totally predictable output of a machine that was built for this exact purpose? Let's get into it.
And that's the big question, right? A lot of Americans see their country as fundamentally peaceful, but if you look at the history, the US has been in military conflicts pretty much constantly. So what is going on? Well, to even start to answer that, we have to get on the same page about what war even means anymore.
When you hear the word war, you probably picture these massive, full-scale invasions and occupations, like Iraq or Afghanistan. But in the 21st century, that definition has gotten way, way broader. It's a lot more complicated now.
Yeah, modern conflict isn't just about those big, formal declarations anymore. It's this whole spectrum of constant, lower-level actions. We're talking about things like drone strikes, special forces raids, cyber operations, or even just having troops permanently stationed in key parts of the world. These things rarely lead the 6 o'clock news, but they are happening all the time, creating this background noise of constant military engagement.
And look, if you take one thing away from all this, it should be this. That constant hum of military operations, it's not random. It's not an accident. It is the predictable, almost inevitable result of a massive interconnected system that was deliberately built decades ago and is still running on all cylinders today.
So let's pull back the curtain on this system, this engine that's behind it all. We're going to call it the primacy machine. And to understand how it works now, we actually have to go all the way back to the moment it was first built, right at the end of World War II.
I mean, you cannot overstate how dramatic this transformation was. In 1939, America was largely isolationist. Its army was tiny, ranked 19th in the world. Just 6 years later, in 1945, it's the undisputed global superpower, period. This one shift completely changed how America saw its role in the world, forever.
So this is the big idea we're talking about, the primacy machine. It's the entire architecture that Washington put together to keep its new top dog status. And it's not just the military. It's a whole web of things. Security alliances like NATO, a global network of bases, a massive defense budget, very specific legal authorities, and of course, a powerful industrial base, all working in concert.
Okay, here's a pretty simple way to think about it. The US basically offers a global security subscription service. It promises to protect its allies, keep the world's trade routes open, and deter major threats. But just like any subscription, it has a really high cost, and it demands constant activity to prove its value to the subscribers. In this case, its allies.
So now that we know what the machine is, let's pop the hood and look at its moving parts. How does this system actually operate day to day and end up pulling the US into action all over the globe? One of the biggest gears in this machine is alliance commitments. The US has promised to defend dozens of countries, and that promise has to mean something, right? So think of American credibility like a bank account. Every time it acts to support an ally, whether through deployments or even strikes, it's making a deposit. But if it fails to act when an ally is threatened, that's like making a huge withdrawal, and it damages its reputation as a reliable partner. This logic creates a really powerful incentive to always respond and to do it visibly. And this right here, this is the physical footprint of that subscription service. Over 800 military bases and installations around the world. I mean, that number is just staggering. This global posture means that whenever a crisis blows up anywhere on the planet, US forces are almost always nearby, which makes a military response the fastest and often the easiest option on the table.
And all of these pieces, they create this powerful feedback loop, you see. The massive defense budget pays for the global bases. The industrial base builds the weapons, which creates jobs and political support at home for even more spending. The alliance pacts create the demand for action, and then the legal authorities provide the permission for it. Each piece just fuels the others, keeping the whole machine in perpetual motion.
But you might be asking, wait a minute, if Congress hasn't formally declared war since World War II, how is all this legal? Well, the answer often comes down to something called an AUMF, an authorization for use of military force. You can basically think of it as a long-term permission slip from Congress that lets a president take quick military action without having a whole new debate every single time. And that brings up a really critical question, one for you to think about. The main AUMF that's used for counterterrorism was passed right after 9/11. So how has its legal interpretation been stretched to cover groups and conflicts decades later, in places that nobody was even thinking about back in 2001?
It's a huge part of the story.
Okay, so we've established the machine is powerful, it's always running, but keeping this thing going at full throttle comes with some major consequences and trade-offs. It is definitely not a free ride. Yeah, running this machine is not cheap, not by a long shot. The human cost for both soldiers and civilians is of course tragic. The financial cost is eye-watering, hundreds of billions of dollars every year that could be spent on priorities at home. And then there's the opportunity cost. Every hour the White House spends on a foreign crisis is an hour they're not spending on challenges here. And hanging over all of it is the constant, terrifying risk that one small skirmish could accidentally...
But here's the thing. It doesn't have to be this way. There are serious alternative strategies out there. Offshore balancing, for example, suggests pulling troops back from the front lines and only stepping in from the sea or the air when it's absolutely necessary. An even bigger change would be a strategy of restraint, which argues for raising the bar for military action way, way higher, using force only as a last resort when the U.S. homeland is under direct threat.
So here's another question for you to chew on. Just imagine if Washington went all in on a policy of restraint. How would its response to conflicts in, say, the Middle East or Eastern Europe look different? Which military actions do you think would still happen, and which ones would be off the table entirely?
All right, let's bring this all back to the real world and make it practical. This isn't just a theory. You can see the primacy machine at work in the news every single day. So here are a few key things to watch for over the next few months. So next time you see the defense budget debates happening in Congress, that's the machine's fuel being negotiated. When you hear about military movements in the Middle East, that's the machine responding to threats. Those joint military exercises in the Pacific, that's the machine sending a clear signal to rivals like China. Even a seemingly boring report on munitions reduction tells you how ready the machine is for the long haul.
You know, this quote just nails it. The U.S. isn't always in a full-blown war, but the very structure that it has built for itself, its alliances, its bases, its laws, makes using military force a frequent, almost default policy tool. As long as the goal is to be the foundation of the global order, well, the machine is going to keep running.
And that leaves us with this one final, kind of paradoxical question. This whole machine was built to create stability, to prevent another great power war. But now, 80 years later, could its constant motion, its relentless need to react and to act, actually be the very thing that risks creating the next major conflict? Something to think about. Thanks for watching.